Welcome back. It is time for our June update on the Chicago real estate market. Strap in. We got a lot of news for you this month. Before we get into it, as always, we're about to give you a breakdown of the overall Chicago area market. If you want to know what's going on in your neighborhood or your town, just fill out that form on our website with your name, email, and the neighborhood you're interested in. We will send you a handcrafted report on what's going on in your own backyard, which, by the way, folks, is almost certainly a little bit different, maybe even a lot different from what we're about to talk about today. So make sure you fill out that form if you want to know more. All right, let's get into it. Median home price growth, it's slowing down. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But for the Chicagoland market overall, home prices were up 8.2% year over year to 303,000. Only 1% of that growth came from this year so far. All right. Last year, in the first 5 months of the year, home prices increased 3.7%. In the city of Chicago, home prices are up 1.5% year over year. And again, most of that growth happened last year, and they've been pretty level since then. Same story in downtown Chicago, where prices are officially flat year over year. What's going on? Let's dig into the supply and demand equation to figure it out. In the Chicago area market overall, the number of homes that went under contract in May of 2022 was down 13.7% as compared to May last year. And the 12-month trailing average, which you can see here, has actually been headed down since its peak about a year ago. That said, you want to know that it's still about 12.4% higher than it was in 2020 and about even with 2019. In Chicago, contracts in May were down 10.6% year over year. But if we back out and look at that 12-month trailing average, we can see that in general, we're still pretty close to the peak, mostly because that peak just happened in February of this year. So compared to 2019, Chicago contracts are up 10.9%. So Chicago contracts are still almost 11% higher than they were in May of 2019. Finally, zooming in all the way in on downtown Chicago, the number of contracts in May was down 16.1%. And then backing out to look at that trailing average, you can see that we just had the peak downtown in March, and we're just a little bit off from there. So that's the demand side of things, and you can see things are slowing down a little bit. A couple things I would like to point out. One, demand could hardly have gotten any higher. In fact, as you're about to see, there are so few homes on the market that it almost certainly has to go down simply because there just aren't that many homes to be putting under contract. That said, it's unlikely to be a coincidence that this decrease started in earnest as soon as interest rates cracked 5%. Looking at the number of homes for sale at the end of May in the Chicagoland market overall, it was down 25.8%. Less than half of what it was in May of 2020. And if you pull out and look at that 12-month trailing average, you see that the inventory of homes for sale is just down, down, down. It doesn't seem to matter that there's not as many contracts. The number of homes for sale keeps headed down, which is part of why I think that this is what's driving the decrease in the number of homes under contract, is simply that there's just not that much left to buy. In the city of Chicago, there were 24.4% fewer homes for sale. And if you look at that rolling 12-month average, it'll just make you want to cry if you're trying to buy a home right now. There's not a lot for sale, and it doesn't seem to be bouncing back up anytime soon, but we'll keep an eye on it. In downtown Chicago, similar story, down 31.1% in terms of the number of homes for sale year over year. Also, in the downtown Chicago market, I want to point out that not only are we down year over year, but we're lower than 2020 and substantially lower than 2019, down about 19%, even from May of 2019. And that's because inventory had started to increase in downtown Chicago even before the pandemic. Probably late 2018 through 2019, inventory increased and then really took off during the pandemic when those homes suddenly became less affordable. And then about a year ago, everyone realized things were opening back up, and we've been burning through that inventory ever since, and that's why you see those bigger decreases in the downtown Chicago market. So, lately I've heard a few people say that they want to wait to buy until home prices come down. Now, I'm not saying home prices won't come down. It's just that, in general, they never do, with one notable exception. I'd like to direct your attention to this Case-Shiller Home Price Index going all the way back to 1987. Now, you're going to see a few things right away. The first thing is that home prices trended up all the way until, you remember that, in 2008 we had a little bit of trouble there in the housing market and they crashed, right? And ever since 2012, when things started to recover, they've just trended on back up. In fact, you really can't find a decrease of more than 1% or so anywhere on that graph if you zoom in on it. And see those gray areas? Those are the other recessions, the ones that housing didn't cause. And what do you notice about home prices? They kept going up, even during those recessions. That's because housing has traditionally been a very recession-resistant market. Now, obviously, you can see a pretty steep drop off there starting in 2008, and that's what's got a lot of people still scared today, almost 14 years later. In fact, you can notice in the Chicago market overall, we're just now catching up to those prices that we had back then, 14, 15 years later. That's crazy. Now, here's the big difference these days. Housing caused the 2008 crash, okay? Because those prices weren't based on a need for housing, they were based on speculation. People back then didn't get approved for a mortgage based on silly things like their history of repaying their debts or whether or not they could afford the monthly payment on the home. They were approved pretty much based on whether or not they could sign the paperwork. That's not what's happening right now. This increase in home price is driven by the fact that there's not enough homes for sale. So, it's possible home prices could go down a little bit overall. And in fact, in some markets, I think that they will decrease 2 to 5% over the next couple of years. And we may even see some high single-digit decreases in a few submarkets. This is a broad picture of the Chicago market overall. As I said before, if you want to know what's going on in your own backyard, fill out the form on our website with your name, email, and the neighborhood or town that you're interested in. And we'll let you know what our predictions are for that area over the next 6 months and further on down the line. Please give us a like and hit that subscribe button, sign up for alerts, and we will see you back here next month with another Chicago real estate market update.